还有2分钟。这样那个还没有讲楞严经之前。
Before the actual class of Surangama Sutra, I would like to address a few things. Firstly, we are currently studying the 5 treatises, and it is ongoing. Mainly everyone's focusing on it, and I think it would be extremely essential to also engage in the actual practice of it. Our mentor classes and our post-class presentations are still going as usual. The majority of you are doing really well. You're being very diligent and proper in your studies and contemplation and practices. My classes are also ongoing. For this week and next week, that's the plan. Previously, within about over a month of time, I've already readjusted and rebalanced many of the relationships and many of the conditions, dispelled various kinds of obstacles. So now everything started to settle down. I've had many meetings throughout that period of time. Within a short period of time, Khenpo will return to Larangar, and for now, I've already handled and resolved many of the issues. Currently, we are running smoothly in terms of our daily management. The Khenpos and Khenmos are working very hard to maintain the smooth running of the Sangha. I myself, on one hand, it is because that I've overexerted myself in high altitude. On the other, I have to engage in translation and many other things that I have to deal with. So many couldn't find me, but finding me is not important. What you need to do now is to focus on your own study and contemplation and practice. Or you can look for the nature of your mind, which is more important than looking for me. I hope that everyone over here would try your very best to exert in the study, contemplation, and practice. Nowadays, this is a good way to study the Dharma. This is quite normalized way of studying the Dharma now. Even when we talk about it in a global setting. And I think this is quite a wonderful way too. So I hope when you're studying the Surangama Sutra and other classes, I wish you could exert all of your effort and pay great attention. Other than that, I don't have any other things to address.
Nyongje Jimbor Zondan Hingmi Jang, Zongner Molom Jimbor, Ngabgyata, Bakra Dargam Santo, Shermarto, Stumba Tije Chanla, Gisham Sar, Nijar Sering Jangans, and Jafar Tujishan Loyal Larman. Jimmy Penzo Jala Soran, the Gorgia Toban Power, Shingirlo,
The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma's difficult encounter in billions of aeons, and now see it here, receive and uphold it, about to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, let's generate the supreme bodhicitta.
Let
us continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. Currently, we're talking about the 9th seeing out of the 10 types of seeings. Yesterday, we already got to the part, we've already covered the part that seeing is spontaneous. It is not of causes and condition. But that title is rather quite long. In the commentary, it says that the 9th one is seeing transcends the ordinary. It transcends deliberate effort, according to some commentaries. Also, we've covered the question asked by Ananda, saying that, well, if the world honored one is talking about the condition of enlightenment pervades the 10 directions and it is everlasting, then what's the difference between the Buddhist view versus that of the heretic view? Also, the Buddha gave a lecture at Mount Lanka on Lankavatara Sutra, where he talked about the different views of the heretics, and he also talked about how the Buddhist view is based on causes and conditions. Therefore, are there any contradictory to the reliant on causes and conditions? Also, the nature of enlightenment is pervasive to the 10 directions. So these are the two questions posed by Ananda. And then Manjushri also posed some questions to the Buddha. So now the Buddha started to answer the questions. The Buddha over here told Ananda, saying that now I have instructed you with such expedients in order to tell you the truth. Yet you do not awaken to it, but mistake it for spontaneity. After Ananda asked this question, Ananda then compassionately answered Ananda by saying that, well, today I am giving you various kinds of expedient means. Because Ananda kept on asking questions, and then the Buddha, by relying on various kinds of examples and metaphors and the skillful means to expound the teaching to Ananda. So the Buddha said that in order to tell you the truth, I use all kinds of expedient means. And then the Buddha said that, yet you do not awaken to it, but mistake it for spontaneity. The Buddha said that I've tried to tell you the truth through various ways, but you're still quite confused of understanding my point. You still think that seeing nature is out of spontaneity. So Ananda thinks that it is either a production of spontaneity or a production of causes and condition. And then Buddha continued to say that if it definitely were spontaneous, you should be able to distinguish the substance of spontaneity. The Buddha then told Ananda by saying that if you think there is something that is spontaneous, that is without production, without cessation, that is permanent, if there is something like that, that is the seeing nature, then you have to analyze to its core to fully see the nature of it. That is to say that if after detailed analysis you really see there is something as the self-nature, as the seeing nature, and the seeing nature is a production of spontaneity, then you should be able to see this spontaneity's nature. And then the Buddha continued to say that, and now you look into the wonderful bright seeing. What is it that is itself? What is itself? Does the seeing take bright light as itself? Does it take darkness as itself? If you think there is something that is a spontaneity, then you have to point to that spontaneity. So you have to first observe from your seeing nature, and then while you make such observation, look at what is spontaneity. So the Buddha continued to ask, well, does the seeing take the bright light as itself? Does the seeing take the darkness as itself? Does it take emptiness as itself? Does it take solid objects as itself? These are the four conditions associated to the spontaneity.
或者呢就是以这个善为自然的啊，就是除了这几个途径以外的话
Do you
基本上
take
没有了。
brightness,
那这里
darkness,
自然也可以
emptiness,
说，或者是
or
自我也可以说，或
the
者说是
solid objects
这
as
种诸物啊，就是这
spontaneity
个
or
字
as
的话呢，就是
itself?
其实有好几种这个意
Other
思吧，
than
就
these
是
four
意思就是
types
说我
of
们的这种
methods
这
to
个要么或者是
distinguish,
这个字呢，就是也
then
有这个
there's
见
no
性
other
的意
ways.
思啊，就是要么你认为是这个命为这个你的见性，要么暗为见性，要么你空或者是色为见性，善为见
So
性，
either
这样。
you point
或有
to
继续告诉
the
啊，安娜呢
brightness
就
or
是如
darkness
命为
as its
子
self
以
nature, or
不见
emptiness, or
暗
as a solid
就是
existence
若
as
复
its self
以
nature. And
空
then
为
the Buddha
自体
continued
色
to
因不
tell
见晒，
Ananda,
如是乃至诸暗当相以为自者，
Ananda, if
则名
itself
则与
consists
名
in
是
light,
见
you should not see
见
darkness.
见性断
Moreover,
灭
if it
云
takes
何见
emptiness
灭
as substance itself,
在下
you
面
should
就
not
是这个
see
佛陀继
solid
续帮阿
objects.
难这个分析吧，就是分析
The
的是
Buddha
呢，
then
如果你
continued
说
to
是这
help
个名
Ananda
为
to
自
make
然
this
啊，就是名为自然的话呢，
distinguishment
那这
and
个
by
自
saying
然
that
呢就是不
when
可
you're
改变的，而
analyzing
且
it,
它呢就是
if you
恒
were
常
to
不
say
变
that
的啊，就
brightness
恒常
is
不变的。 那
itself,
既然是名为自然的话呢，那名是已经自然的，就这样一
then
来的话呢，就
it
永远
should
都是
be
不应该
constant
见暗
and
的啊，
permanent.
如果
In that
这个
way,
自
you
然
should
就是
not
有
be
变
able to
化的
see
话呢，就是
darkness.
那并不是它是
If
周边
it
和恒常
changes,
的了啊，就如
if
果
you
是
do see
你说是名
darkness,
为自然的话呢，就是那永远
then
都是不能
brightness
见暗
cannot
的。
be its nature.
同样的道理就是，如
Otherwise,
果呢
you
这个
shouldn't be
空
able
为这
to
个
see
自体啊，
darkness.
就是空为自然的这个体的话
For
呢，
the
那
same
就是
reason,
永
if
远
you
都
were
是
to
也
think
不能
that
见这
emptiness
个
is
善啊，
as
就
its
是不能
nature,
见善。
then
然后
it
呢，
should
反过来
not
就
bring
是说
you
的话呢，如果
to
是这
the
个赛为
seeing
这个
of
自
a
体
solid
啊，就是
object
赛为
because
自
they're
然，
all
那这样
empty.
的话呢，就是名就是
And
永远
vice
都是不
versa.
能见的。那如是这样呢，就是去这个推测的时候呢，
After
那
such
就是
logical
刚才四个法
analysis
当
out
中
of
就是
the
还有
four
一个暗
types
呢，
of
是那么这
the
个暗呢，就是
characteristics,
如果
there
是
is
因为
also
这
a
个自体的话
darkness.
呢，
If
那
you
么
were
这
to
与
take
这个
darkness
命的
as
时候
itself,
呢，那
then
见性就已经
it
断灭了啊，就是为什
then
么
you should
呢？
not be able
因
to
为
see
你的
brightness,
这个
because if you
见
were
呢
to
就
see
是是自
brightness,
然的，就是
then
你刚才
you
就是所
simply
谓的见性
eradicated
呢，就
its
是是自
nature
然
that
的，
is
有是这个
darkness.
暗的。如果是暗的话呢，
If you were
那
to
不可能
think
有
that
改变。假设说是
itself,
你
the
就是
nature
把这个
itself as
暗的这个部
spontaneity
分
is
呢已
also
经舍弃了，
darkness,
就是变成
it
了命的话
cannot
呢，那因
be
为前面你
changed.
已
Then
经
that
承认
means
的暗是这个
when
见
you,
性，
for
那这
example,
样的话呢，
abandon
就是这个
darkness,
见性呢，就是已经断灭了。
the
那已经
nature
断
has
灭了的
changed
话
to
呢，怎么
brightness.
会说是见明呢？
In
就是
such a
这
way,
见
you
明呢，
have
就是
already given up
绝对
on
是
its
不合理
nature.
的。就是所
The
以
nature
它这
of
里的话呢，就
itself
是首
has
先是
been
这个破啊，就
eradicated.
阿
The
难的这
nature
个
of
自
the
然啊，就是我
itself
昨天
being
最后也
darkness
是
has
跟
been
大家讲过，
eradicated
就是
so that
它
you
这
can
里
see
所谓
brightness.
的自然也好，所谓的这种
This
这个
spontaneity, the
主我也
itself,
好，或者说是真我也好，或者说
the
是这个造作者的
self
话呢，
or the
这
creator
个
or the
小
the
乘和
doer
还有这个外道的话呢，一致认为有一种实有的
is
东西。
considered as
既然有一
solidly
个实有的东
existent
西的话呢，那么就
according to
是
certain schools in
就是这个
Hinayana
实有的
and
东西呢，
some
就
of
是永
the
远都
and
是
the
就是不能改
heretic
变的。就
schools.
像中观转论释当
They
中
feel
这
that
个
there
波罗
is
波
something
切有大
existent
量的文字
that
就已
cannot
经
be
这个
changed.
解释一样的。啊，就如果是
According
一
to
个
Mipan
真实的
Rinpoche's
事物的
commentary
话，
on
在
the
所知范围
ornament
当
of
中，如果有一个
Madhyamika,
真实的事物
he
的话呢，
discussed
那就
in
是这
great
个所有
length
的形形
about
色
this
色的
part.
所知呢，都不可得
He
见
said
的
that
啊，
as
就
long
是
as
不
you
可
think
得
there
见
is
的。
something
所
that
以
is
我
solidly
们用义理
existent,
来推测的时
then
候呢，就是一定会是
you
有
should
这样的
not
这个
be
过
able
程。
to perceive
同样的
such
道
kind
理，
of
如果
variety
像
of
这个阿难
objects.
尊者所承认的那样的，就是那么我们的这个信心也是，它是以一种自然的东西的话呢，就
So
是
let's
那我
look
们
at
可以以你
ourselves.
来分析，就是那以
Do you
这个
think
自然
our
的东西
mind
是
is
以明来
something
这个
that
暗的，还是以
is
暗来暗的，还是
bright
空和
or
散，就是
dark?
这样来按你
Do you
的。
think the
那最
nature
终的
of
话
it
呢，
is
就是
empty
都
or
得不
solidly
到
or
的，
solidly
就是得不到的。
existent?
所以呢，
When
我
you
们对你这
search
个所谓
for
的
the
自然呢，
nature
就
of
是
it,
绝对不是有一个
you
这
would
个
not
诚
be
实
able
的
to
所
find
知，这一
anything
点是非常
that
关
could
键。
define it. There is
那么接
nothing
下来
that
呢，就
is
是佛陀又开始
substantial
问这个
about about it. This is really the key point that is discussed over here. And then Ananda continued to ask the Buddha by saying that Ananda said, I I am certain that the nature of this wonderful seeing is not spontaneous. Now I discern that it is produced from cause and conditions. After the Buddha helped Ananda to make analysis on how the spontaneity being in nature cannot be the case, then Ananda further asked, then this seeing, this wonderful seeing, which was previously translated as the essence of seeing or the seeing nature, it says that the essence of seeing or the seeing nature, in fact, the nature of it is not spontaneity. However, when the Buddha was giving the teaching at Mount Lanka in the Lankavatara Sutra, the Buddha said that everything derived from causes and conditions. So Ananda at that time then fall back onto the causes and conditions. Ananda said that when it must be based on causes and conditions. So he said, now I discern that it is produced from causes and conditions, but I do not yet have it clear in my mind. I now ask the thus come one, how this idea is consonant with the nature of causes and conditions. Because Ananda is quite confused. If the nature of mind is causes and conditions, is production from causes and conditions, then it definitely is impermanent because it is a dharma of arising and ceasing. However, previously we've learned that the nature of enlightenment is all-pervasive to the 10 directions, and it is clear and constant or permanent. Therefore, Ananda started to have this question. I think we sometimes, if you really observe your own mind, you probably would get very confused as well. When we studied, for example, the flight of the Garuda or the treasury of Dharmadhatu and all of those direct pointing out instructions, it sounds very direct, and then we feel quite helpful. And there are lots of you who would feel that hopeful, and they feel they recognize a little bit of the nature of mind. But when it comes to the Surangama Sutra, especially for those people who felt that they probably see a little bit of the nature of mind, after these questions going through, they probably feel that they don't have confidence anymore. After the questions and answers given by the Buddha, you probably feel quite doubtful. But you don't have to worry. Why is that? It is because the teachings given here is by logical analysis, and the nature of mind, especially the seeing nature aspect of it, is can be taken in by a certain group of sentient beings, and they can understand and they can even attain enlightenment and realization by the analysis of Surangama Sutra. And another group can rely on the simple and direct pointing out by taught in the Tantrayana or the Zen traditions. So it is really very much depending on the capacity of sentient beings. But out of all the sutras, the Surangama Sutra is indeed really well known. There are people who can attain liberation based on their own faith and some by other methods. So you don't have to worry too much about it. But I think listening to the Surangama Sutra could definitely help you to recognize where you understand and where you don't understand, where you feel that you kind of understand and kind of don't, and where you feel that you understand but you forget about it afterwards very quickly. So it's quite important to develop faith, first of all, and then you have to develop a sense of respect and joy when you're receiving this teaching. If you were to be able to do that, then you will be able to gain a great deal of attainment or achievement. It is just like when we are studying from a worldly teacher. If you really like that teacher, then you like that class or the subject that teacher teaches. And you would remember the teachings from that teacher for a long period of time. On the other hand, if you don't like certain teacher, you would not enjoy his or her class, and you would not be able to gain any benefits. So that also applies to Buddhism. So if you have great faith, deep faith, by relying on this faith, the power and the benefit you'll be able to receive on your own mind stream is extraordinary. Therefore, when it comes to reading the Dharma texts, I think we should supplicate to Shakyamuni Buddha again and again and make the aspiration that may I read it again and again.
接下来
After Ananda asked this question to the Buddha, the Buddha then said, "You say it is causes and conditions. I ask you again." Since Ananda said that it is a production of causes and conditions, then the Buddha said that, "Now let me ask you, Ananda." So we can see that there's a lot of coming back and forth between the Buddha and Ananda. Then Buddha said that because you're now seeing, you said it is causes and conditions. I ask you again, because you are now seeing, the seeing nature manifests. The Buddha now started to analyze from the two aspects. One is cause and the other one is condition. So from the cause aspect, now let me ask you a question. Is it because of light that the seeing exists? Is it because of darkness that the seeing exists? Is it because of emptiness that seeing exists? Or is it because of solid objects that the seeing exists? Since you think that it is a production of causes and conditions, then let me ask you about the cause. Are you relying the brightness or darkness or emptiness or solid existence as the cause of your seeing? So what is it out of the four types of causes? Of course, majority of you know that this seeing nature is, you cannot say that it is a production of the four causes. But the Buddha over here asked Ananda. And then to further analyze it for Ananda to demonstrate to him, the Buddha said, Ananda, if light brings it into existence, you should not see darkness. And if it exists because of darkness, you should not see light. It is the same with emptiness and solid objects. Because if you see, because if you're seeing nature is a production of lightness, then whenever there is light, it is there. Whenever the light disappears, you will not be able to see the nature when it's dark. And vice versa. Also, when it comes to emptiness and solid existence, the Chinese translation for the object is actually blockage, so emptiness and blockage. But in the Tibetan translation, it is emptiness and objects. So the explanation goes, well, if you think the nature of it is because of it takes, if you think the nature of seeing is caused because of light, then you can never see darkness, and vice versa. If you think it's emptiness, then you can never see objects, and vice versa too.
暗有见呢，缘空有见呢，缘这个善有见呢，然后就下面就是说这个。
According to the commentary of the correct lineage, it says that with the causes that can be explained as seeds, and the conditions are the contributing conditions. I think this is a better way of explaining it. Some other masters didn't explain it in the way that separates the causes and conditions, and it would be a little bit more difficult to explain. But I think Ananda's question talks about causes and conditions. Therefore, when it comes to the Buddha's answering, the Buddha also gives the answers based on causes and conditions too. So again, the Buddha gives the answers based on brightness, darkness, emptiness, and objects. And then he continued to answer about the questions based on the conditions as well. He said that if it exists because of the condition of emptiness, then you should not see solid objects. If it exists because of the condition of solid objects, you should not see emptiness. It is the same with light and darkness.
晒的话呢，就是永远都不能见，因为呢，就是它没有这个空的周延呢，就是这样。
Because they're contradictory they're contradictory conditions. They're contradictory to begin with. Therefore, you cannot take the contradictory properties as conditions. So when it's empty, then you won't be able to use it as the condition for emptiness, and vice versa. And same applies to light and darkness. So if you use lightness as the condition, then there is no darkness, because the contributing conditions is the lightness. Or if you take darkness as the contributing condition, in the same way, you can no longer have brightness as the condition.
这个对阿难说是这个不是这个因缘而产生这个见性。
This is the Buddha's analysis to expound that this seeing nature is not a production of causes and condition. When the great masters use various methods to point out the nature of mind to the disciples so that they can recognize it, they would use various kinds of means, various kinds of skillful methods. However, those skillful methods are only demonstrated so that the disciples can recognize what is already intrinsically existent to all of them. To further demonstrate that point, let me give you an example of space. The space itself is unconditioned. However, if the wind can dispel the clouds to reveal space, you cannot say that because of the causes of wind and the causes and condition of wind that dispel the clouds, which gives a production of space. So when it comes to seeing nature, I think this is the way to understand it, though it is difficult to understand. When it comes to the seeing nature, is it a production of causes and condition? The Buddha then further analyzed it to separate causes and condition, and asking Ananda, is it really a production of causes or is it a production of conditions? And then the Buddha give the conclusion by saying that thus you should know that essential, enlightened, wonderful brightness is due to neither causes nor conditions, and it does not arise spontaneously. So this essential, enlightened, wonderful brightness, this is another term that the Chinese translation is using over here. But this particular essence is not due to neither causes nor conditions, nor does it arise spontaneously. Not the spontaneous production or spontaneously present in either the heretic traditions or that of the Buddhism teachings. It is not that which is not spontaneous, it is not that it is not, nor is it that it is not not. It is not that which is or is not. This is the explanation on the four extremes. So parting from the four extremes, neither is nor is not, neither it is not, nor is it that it is not not.
最后的话呢，就是逆一切相，即是一切法，就是那真正就是我们要通达，就是坚信的时候呢，就是实际上是原来是远离一切相的，这就是
Any dharma is that which is apart from all characteristics. Whatever you can perceive with characteristics, they are simply the illusions. If you were to see the characteristics as without characteristics, one is seeing the true Buddha. So all the characteristics, if we can part from all of them, then that is the truth. As it is stated in the Zen tradition, it says that if you were to say that it is one thing, then you have not understood it. According to the Mahayana Shraddhottapada Shastra, it says that therefore all the Dharma is parting from the characteristic of speech, of name, of the conditions. For such a reason, it is of all great equanimity. So the true Dharma, the true essence is devoid of, is parted from speech, from conception, is parted from all kinds of elaborations. I think at this point, Ananda started to understand it. The seeing nature is not something that is spontaneous, like the ones that's decided or the ones that's recognized by the heretics tradition, nor is it something that is a solid existence but pervading everything. It is not something that is a fruition of certain seeds based on causes and conditions. If you were to think that the seeing nature is any of those, you have not seen the true nature. All of those stated above are simply the causes, conditions, and the production of conventions. The Buddha said that now in the midst of dharmas, how can you use your mind to make distinctions that are based on worldly sophistries, terms, and characteristics? That is like grasping at empty space with your hands. So the Buddha said that, started to scold Ananda by saying that, why are you still taking turns and getting sucked into this conventional distinctions? Why are you still grasping with your mind, grasping onto various kinds of conceptions and couldn't pull yourself out of that quagmire? At that time, Ananda already relied on the Buddha for over 20 years, and he seems like still being trapped in his dualistic mind, in all kinds of conventional terms and speech. But the sentient beings in this world, the worldly beings, they naturally have all kinds of false conception. They hold on to permanence, bliss, self, and purity in a false way. But this is our mind. At the beginning of studying Dharma, that's how we were. And then after years of studying it, there are still people who had not reduced their self-grasping nor of the dualistic thoughts. Rather, even a group of them started to have more of those false conceptions. So the Buddha scolded him by saying that, why are you grasping onto those things which does not exist, just like the moon reflected in the water and the daughter of a barren woman? By holding onto it is just like grasping space with your hand. It's like you're trying to hold on to space, trying to touch space, trying to massage space, trying to tie a knot with space, which is completely impossible. In Mipa Rinpoche's commentary on Madhyamika, he said that this is simply diligence in vain, without any point, completely meaningless. If you were to think that there is a way to hold on to space, to grasp space, to live in the midst of the space, and thinking of the flowers in the midst of space, how could any of those to happen? It doesn't happen at all. In fact, if you want to see the nature and hold on to the nature being something that is spontaneously, constantly existent thing, and being a production of causes and conditions, that is completely absurd. Now let's look at the 10th question, or 10th aspect. Though there are various titles to it, the title is seeing is apart from seeing. The seeing is apart from seeing. Ananda said to the Buddha, if the nature of the wonderful enlightenment has neither causes nor conditions, then why does the world-honored one always tell the bhikshus that the nature of seeing derives from the four conditions of emptiness, brightness, the mind, and the eyes? What does that mean? In the last question of Ananda, after receiving an excellent reply from the Buddha, Ananda then started to ask another question. A personality trait of Ananda is that even if Ananda got scolded from the Buddha, he would not get upset with the Buddha. Compared to the disciples nowadays, if our teacher were to scold us in front of many disciples in a large assembly, I think not many people would be able to ask questions afterwards. They probably won't have such courage, even if they were to have more questions. But Ananda is indeed very different in such a way. That is why he kept on following the Buddha throughout his life and relied on the Buddha as his teacher. So Ananda over here then asked another question with his persistence, and that's something that we should learn from him too. And the Chinese term that's used here, the nature of the wonderful enlightenment, that's another term that's used to describe the seeing nature, the seeing essence, the true mind. We've already covered that it is not cause. It is not a production of cause nor condition. And then Ananda asked the Buddha by saying that, well, isn't that you always tell bhikshus that the nature of seeing derives from 4 conditions? Of emptiness, brightness, the mind, and the eyes. Without those conditions, if it is without these conditions, as you've stated, then why would you give teachings on that through the Vinaya Sutra, where you've already told the bhikshus that it is because of the 4 conditions you would be able to see the nature of mind, where you said that through the emptiness of through the condition of emptiness you would be able to see what is existent, and as through the condition of brightness you would be able to see what is manifested, through the condition of mind you would see what is known, and through the condition of eyes you would be able to perceive. If now your reply to my previous question is that the seeing nature is not a production of causes and conditions, isn't that contradictory to your previous teachings in the other teaching situations? Then how could you say that? The 4 conditions, according to the commentary of the right lineage, where it says that the Chittamatra school recognized that there are 9 types of conditions. The Theravada recognized that there are the 4 types of conditions. So over here, Ananda said it is the 4 conditions. The seeing nature needs the 4 conditions. So what are the 9 conditions then? The first one is condition to emptiness, condition of emptiness, because without emptiness there is no way that you would be able to perceive anything. That is to say, if everything's blocked from your eyes, then you won't be able to see anything if there's any blockage in between. The second condition is that the second condition is a condition of brightness. With brightness, we will be able to perceive. The third one is the condition of roots, such as the roots of the eyes, of the ears. Without those kinds of dominating conditions, we will not be able to perceive anything. The fourth one is the object condition, but over here, the object doesn't point to the external phenomena. Rather, it is the consciousness that preserves the external objects or phenomena, because this is according to the teaching of Chittamatra school, the mind-only school. So they do not come to the recognition of the external object being true. The fifth one is the mind of wanting to perceive as a condition. The sixth one is the core condition. The core condition should refer to the 8th consciousness, which then refers to the seeds of perception. And then the 7th one is the defiled phenomenal conditions, the 7th consciousness, the manas. And the 8th one is the differentiating consciousness, differentiating conditions. And the differentiation that is referred here is probably the 6th consciousness, the mind consciousness, and the 9th one is the seed consciousness. the consciousness as a seed. Many of the Chittamatra school, based on their own opinion, their own philosophical doctrines, they started to split all the conditions based on the consciousness. Therefore, it is divided into the 9. Anyhow, over here we're talking about only the 4, the emptiness, brightness, root consciousness, and the mind consciousness. We can also divide it in such a way. I think whenever people have time, it could be useful to further analyze the 9 conditions according to the Chittamatra school as well. And for those of you who are currently studying Buddhist logic, if you can understand it or analyze it through the various kinds of conditions and causes that's taught in the Treasury of Valid Cognition, where it talks about all kinds of causes and conditions and the difference of perceiving the objects, there are some subtle differences too. When it comes to Ananda's question and his angle, according to some commentary, it says that the point of view of Ananda's question are mainly based on his eyes. But the Buddha mainly gives the answer following the mind. Usually we say that seeing is true, but over here it is the mind, whatever is based on mind is true. This is different because the point of views are very different. Those who believe in materialism or the existence or any of those schools that holds on to a true existence, they would hold on to the eyes or the eyes perception. But when it comes to the Mahayana and anything above Chittamatra school, then they would place more of importance on the mind seeing. After Ananda asked this question, the Buddha then told the Buddha by saying that, Ananda, what I have said about the worldly causes and conditions has nothing to do with the primary meaning. This is quite crucial. He said that though in different kinds of teaching situations I've already expounded the causes and conditions about our animated and inanimate world, and I've already talked about the causes and conditions of all phenomena. If you remember, the Buddha said that everything rises because of causes and conditions, everything ceases because of causes and conditions. This is the teaching of the great Buddha, of the great Shramana. But this is the causes and this is the Dharma of causes and conditions. However, this teaching is not the primary meaning. It's not the absolute. Rather, those teachings are given to guide the sentient beings in this world, to guide the Shravakas, to guide the ordinary beings so that they will not fall into the lower realms. Because many people in this world, they think that things occur without a cause. In order to refute their opinion or their belief system that things occur without cause, therefore the Buddha talked about the causes and conditions. Also, there are people who then think that there are constant causes, there are then the wrong causes, and because they rely on the wrong causes, they would, of course, reap the fruition of suffering. So the teachings of causes and conditions that's taught by the Buddha are given to the sentient beings out of secretive, skillful means. According to Lankavatara Sutra, it says that all kinds of phenomena is without birth. This is the primary teaching. This is the absolute. However, the foolish ones, the ordinary foolish ones, they would fall into the lower realms if they were to hold on to this primary teaching. Because the foolish ordinary ones, they would hold on to either existent or not existent. Therefore, the Buddha gives the teaching of causes and conditions. But the way he gives those teachings on causes and conditions is to guide sentient beings, a group of sentient beings. And then the Buddha continued to say that Ananda, let me ask you another question. People in this world say, I can see. What is meant by seeing? What is not seeing? The Buddha now started to give a quiz to Ananda by saying that, well, the worldly beings said that they can see. Now, what is seeing and what is not seeing? Because the seeing and not seeing by the worldly, in the worldly sense, they are not trustworthy, they're not reliant. Now, let me ask you a question. The Buddha said, Ananda then to reply this question by saying that due to the light of the sun, the moon, and lamps, people in the world can see all kinds of appearances. That is called seeing. We usually would say yes, because of the sun, the moon, and the lights that comes from lamps. Then we can see everything, all the phenomenal world, the scenery, the houses, and the vase, and the pillars. We can see everything. This is called seeing. If it were not for these three kinds of lights, they would not be able to see. For example, if there is no sunlight, moonlight, and there is no lamplight, then everything would be extremely dark. Then people would say that, oh, I cannot see. But once there is the sun, moon, and lamp's light, with all of those causes and conditions, then people would say that they could see. Now the Buddha started to refute Ananda's point of view. The Buddha said that, Ananda, if it is called not seeing when there is no light, you should not see darkness. If in fact you do see darkness, which is none other than the lack of light, how can you say there is an absence of seeing? The Buddha started to say that, well, since you said that without light is called not seeing, then what you call not seeing should also include not seeing darkness. When it comes to not seeing darkness, I think we've already discussed that earlier as well. Because according to the worldly beings, when it's completely dark, when it's pitch black, we should not be able to see anything. But at that time, you still see darkness. But if you can still see darkness, it is simply that you can see, but you see darkness because there is a lack of light. Not seeing should be not seeing darkness as well. Because if you can see darkness, you shouldn't say that you don't see anything. If you were to say that seeing darkness is not seeing, then seeing light is not shouldn't be considered as seeing either. So there is a further analysis in the later part. Sometimes I think we should contemplate in such a way that the Buddha, even if we do not even talk about all of the great merits of eradicating and enlightenment, eradication and enlightenment, if we were to think of him as just an ordinary being in this world, his wisdom is still extremely sharp. just to think about that scene. Though that we were not there, we couldn't see it there, but through their debate, the coming back and forth between Ananda and Buddha, we're still quite impressed by the great wisdom of the Buddha. And that happened about 2,500 years ago. What an excellent debate.
就是那分析的时候呢，如果阿难这样一说的话，我们可能说对对对，阿难你说的是对，就是黑暗的。
And you can place yourself at the same situation if you don't believe it.
但是这个光明呢可以见到。
If you were to be questioned by Ananda, how would you then analyze it for Ananda? Maybe sometimes you will be taken away by Ananda's view, and whenever Ananda says so and so, you'll be like, yes, that's right, you're right. Since when it's dark, we can't see. This is called not seeing. When there's light, we can see, therefore it is seeing. Because that's worldly people's consideration. That's what they would accept as the truth. But the Buddha speaks other than the worldly perspective. His perception surpassed that of the ordinary. And he started to analyze to Ananda. Ananda, if when it is dark, you call it not seeing because you do not see light, then since it is now light, you do not see the characteristic of darkness, it should also be called not seeing. Isn't that interesting? Because the worldly view, if according to the conventional worldly view, I don't think we will be able to come up with such great debate. But right away, the Buddha would be able to eradicate the wrong view and eradicate the conceptual understanding of Ananda. So the Buddha then said that thus the two characteristics would be both called not seeing. If you were to say that you don't see light, then you don't see darkness. If you were to say that you see darkness, you don't see light. So vice versa. Although these two characteristics replace one another, your seeing nature does not lapse for an instant. Thus, you can know that there is seeing in both cases. Now, then, can you say there is no seeing? This is to give an example that when there is light, then darkness has already been dispelled and light took its place, and it could be exactly the other way around. But in that case, it doesn't mean that you temporarily don't have the seeing nature when there is a switch of darkness and lightness. It is that when you see lightness, you don't see darkness, but your seeing nature is still existent. When there is darkness, though you don't see brightness, but your seeing nature is still existent. You shouldn't say that, oh, when there's light and I don't see darkness, therefore my seeing nature is disappeared. So your seeing nature doesn't correlate to lightness or darkness because if you were to say that they're correlated, then there is the birth and death of darkness and lightness, which then refer to that your seeing nature has birth and death as well, but that is not true. If you were to have a little bit of recognition at the time you have greed, it disappears. At the time you generate a bit of anger, it then runs away. It is not to follow our conventional mind. Your seeing nature is also appears at the same time it disappears, and disappears at the same time it appears. But it is not true. The Buddha then said that thus you can know that there is seeing in both cases. How then can you say there is no seeing? Both of them can be called as seeing. You can see both light and dark. At that time, in fact, there is no alternation of the existence of the seeing nature. Your seeing nature had never disappeared. And then, what is the seeing nature? This seeing nature that's expounded by the Buddha is just like the direct pointing out of the nature of mind. This is one of the most important teaching given in Zen Buddhism on the seeing of nature of mind. So how is it expounded then? This is a very profound teaching given. So over here, the Buddha said that, therefore, Ananda, you should know that when you see light, the seeing is not the light. When you see darkness, the seeing is not the darkness. When you see emptiness, the seeing is not emptiness. When you see solid objects, the seeing is not solid objects. This is the conclusion by saying that, Ananda, you should know that when you see brightness, in fact, the seeing nature is not brightness. When you see darkness, what you see is not this darkness, and when you see emptiness, your seeing nature is not this emptiness. And when you see objects that blocks, then your seeing nature is not the objects, which means that by the changes of brightness and darkness and emptiness as well as objects, our conventional mind would make changes, but our eye consciousness, at that time our eye consciousness would change as well. But the seeing nature will not change because of any of those. It is not that when you see brightness or darkness and then they would change. It is not like that. Based on the previous questions and answers, this particular conclusion should be valid. It is to say that our nature of mind does not change based on the brightness or darkness of external world or the emptiness and objects to change. It is not to say that my mind changes based on my eye consciousness, follows this or that. The eye consciousness changes based on lightness and darkness and emptiness and objects, but the same nature doesn't change based on that. This is the key here. Having realized these four meanings, you should also know that when you see your seeing, the seeing is not the seeing to be seen, since the former seeing is beyond the later, and the later cannot reach it. When one says that, then I think it's very difficult to understand. The first seeing is the seeing of the nature. When the seeing nature first arises, the aspect of seeing, I think I've read many commentaries on it, but I think Master Oyi's explanation is probably easier to understand. He said that when you're at the time of a seeing nature arises, there is an aspect that is seeing, which is more leaning towards the eyes, that aspect of seeing. The seeing that's related to your eyes, that is not true seeing, because that's a seeing of characteristics. But the seeing nature is parted from that seeing through eyes.
实际上是他就愿你了。刚才就是明见也好，空见也好，就是暗见也好，
This kind of
这些
seeing
都已经
nature
没有了。
is parted
见不能
from
计较，所以我
the
们
seeing of
世俗的
brightness,
这
of
个
emptiness,
就
of
是见分
darkness,
的
and
话
so
呢，就
on.
是根本不能触及真正的见性啊，就这个道理呢，
As the seeing through the eyes, the conventional seeing does not even come close to the seeing nature.
应该就是完全是也是一样的。
In fact,
所以这个
seeing
道理的话呢，
and seeing,
还是
though
很
they are the
很
same
深的，就是
term,
你看
same
到
word that's
那
used,
个
but
就是很
the
多的包括明朝的、
the connotation
宋朝
and
的
the meaning
还有
is
那个
completely
清朝的，
different.
就是很多大的话呢，瞪楞眼
The
睛，
great
就是读到就
masters
是刚才那
from
个
Ming
渐渐
Dynasty,
知识
Song
见非实
Dynasty,
践，还有
and
那
even
个
Qing
什么就是
Dynasty,
见
when
有
they
意见，
read
见不
to
能
this
计，
part
就是这
about
句话的时候呢，就是很多
the
都
when
已
you
经就是
see
一
or
看
seeing,
就
the
是
seeing
开
is
悟啊，
not
就是
the
一看
seeing
就
to be
是开
seen.
悟的比较
When they read to
多
that
一
part,
点。
many
那个应该
attained
是明高僧传是吧？
realization.
明高僧
I
传里面
believe,
呢，就是
according
有一
to
个叫做是
the
这个
great master's biography
叫
in
什
Ming
么，就是
Dynasty,
叫呼求
there
的
was
这个
a
禅师吧，
great
就是他呢
master whose
其
name
实
is
是
Master
大
Hucho.
概9岁的时候就出家，
When
后来呢就是受戒
he
律啊，
was
就然
9
后呢
years
学这
old,
个戒律
he
为主的这个好多论言，然后
got
呢就是注有
ordination,
释放，
and then
后来就是遇
after
到了有一
studying
个叫做当时非常出
mainly
名的一个
on
叫就是
precepts,
圆悟禅师。
he
然后圆悟
later
禅师
met
的时
a
候呢，就
great
是
master whose
圆悟
name is
禅师
Yuan Wu,
问那个
and
呼
Master
求，
Yuan Wu
问
asked
呼求呢，
Hucho,
就刚才就是
saying
下面
that
的，就渐渐知识，渐非实践啊，就是渐有
saying
利，
this
渐
particular
渐不
verse
计，就是这句话就
of
是
the
他的
seeing
念一
is not
遍，
the seeing to
念
be
一遍以后
seen.
呢，把自己的
When
授
you
权就是
see your
授
seeing,
授呢，就是做一个
after
传统，
he
就是
said
让那
that,
个就
he
是就是呼求呢，就是看，就是呼求也叫做是弄禅师。
he
这弄禅师看的
extended
话呢，
his
就是问
fist
他，就是
to
你
show
见到了没有？
Master Hucho.
然后当时呢，就是他
And
说是
then
我已经
Master
见到了。
Hucho said that,
就
yes,
见到
I
了，
see.
然后见到的时候呢，就这个时候圆悟禅师呢，就是说
And
是
then
不上
Master
暗
Yuan
度，
Wu
就
said
是
that
进行呵斥他。呵斥他的时候呢，就是他已经这个就切入，就是已经证悟了。
said that
就是因为
what
刚
kind
才
of
那个
understanding do
寄
you
送
have?
就
And
是因为
started
这
to
个
scold him.
寄送的
And
原因
because
呢，
of
就
his
是他已
scolding,
经
right away he
开悟
attained
了。就开悟以后的
realization.
话呢，就是他后来说是这个
And he attained
诸
this
密不妨
realization
怒
because
水
of
不
this
发，就是
particular
他就
verse.
他因为
After he
参众很多
attained
大德的话呢，
realization,
他开悟的时候呢，就是经常有时候是自然而然流露出一些就是这样的一种特别奇妙的这个词吧，就是他已经开悟
he
了。当然有些是可能是
was able
也
to
假的开悟
naturally
啊，
and
就是假的就是
spontaneously
造一些论，
flow
然后
out
我们
of
以前在
wisdom
印度教育当中呢
words.
也引用过一些禅宗的这个假开悟，就是的这样的，就还有其他大的就是进行呵斥的一些公案吧。
In terms of the realization stories in Zen Buddhism, there are some that's about the genuine realization, and there are lots about the false realization too. Many of those stories were recorded back then.
有一个叫做是真愿略记啊，就是也是一个就是前辈的很多的
Back in Qing Dynasty, there was another master who's
的公案，就是那么这里呢，就是当时有一个叫做无患居士，就是他呢就是督导这个楞严经，就是也是
in fact,
在这里，就是
great lay practitioner whose name was Wu Huan, without illusion. When he read till this part, he also attained liberation over here.
南国禅师啊，就是南国禅师那里去这个问。
After attained realization, he went to Master Nangu and asked Master Nangu to validate his level of realization. Therefore, the master asked him, "Do you see anything?" And then this lay practitioner said that
什么板也放无记吧，就是板也放无记，就是它是一种表示方法吧。它是
he said that his realization is like
有电信的一个寄送了啊，就是后来就
releasing
当然我们知道这个比如说半夜这个放
a crow
的话，那就是不知道什么样的状态。
in the midnight.
可能参众一种
This
表示方法
particular
就是我们如果
expression
在黑夜
in Zen
当中放
Buddhism
无记的话呢，可能本来也是漆黑一片，再加上是这个
In the dark
无
night,
记
if
的话
one
呢
were
不知
to
道是
release
什么
a
意思
crow,
但实际上呢
a
就是这
black
也是
bird,
一种开悟的这种表现吧。
that
还有呢，
is
就是
a
那个虚
seeing,
高僧传
and
当中
that
有一
is
个叫普济禅师啊，就普济禅师，
expression
他也
of
是当时这个
realization
读
of
楞严经的
his.
时候呢，
another master, according to the great master's biography, it says that there was once a Zen master whose name is Master Puji. He also read this particular verse and then attained realization. After his attainment, he started to build many monasteries and started to propagate the Dharma and benefit sentient beings, and he had a great activity in this world. Many stories like such. I hope for such kind of profound verses which brought many great masters to attain liberation and profound levels of realization should be written down by us and then post them at places that we can often see, even if we don't attain realization at the first time or second time, and slowly, eventually, those words and those meanings would be able to get into our hearts. Some masters say that if one were to see the true nature, then that is beyond the character of seeing. Maybe these are not very clear to you, but when at the time of attaining this, you would be able to understand it. So the Buddha then continued to say to Ananda by saying that being the case, how can you say that your absolute intuition perception has something to do with causes and conditions or spontaneity, or that it has something to do with mixing and uniting? At this point, if you were to say that the causes and conditions, the spontaneity and mixes and uniting, those are the real seeing, that is not valid. The Tibetan translation is a bit different, but I don't think we need to get into it. And then the Buddha said that you narrow-minded Shravakas, the sound hearers, are so inferior and ignorant that you're unable to penetrate through to the purity of the characteristic of reality. So the Buddha started to scold him and the Shravakas by saying that you have such narrow mind and your wisdom is also very shallow. But really, when we think about these group of Shravakas, they already attained the realization of selflessness, of a self, or they have at least attained the first fruition. They're already much better than all of us who are still mundane beings. Look at the human beings nowadays, only thinking about wealth, thinking about materialistic gain, or thinking about relationships, thinking about social status, and thinking about to spend their life in peaceful ways. But there is no understanding of the profound Dharma and the profound understanding of emptiness. So if the Buddha were to scold us, indeed it would be more appropriate. The sentient beings who have more afflictions and much worse negative karmas. The Buddha then said that, now I will teach you, you should consider it well and do not become weary or negligent on the wonderful road to Bodhi. So the Buddha over here specifically said that I've already given you such profound teachings, which is the wisdom of teaching. So all of you, the assembly and Ananda, you should continuously to contemplate upon it. This is the wisdom that can be generated through contemplation. So you should not be weary nor negligent. This is the diligence on the practice. So one should not get lazy and get tired and weary. This is part of the wisdom that can be generated through practice. This is the kind of practice that we should do in our daily life, the actual action of treading on the path of the Bodhi. We should not give up because of any little obstacles. We shouldn't stop. We definitely should not give up. All of those are not appropriate ways of treading onto the path of liberation. You have to have a mind of diligence. We have to supplicate to the Guru and the Three Jewels so that we can continuously to tread forward on the path of liberation. Now this is the 10th one. Now we should stop on the class of Surangama Sutra.